Welcome to episode 14 of Heart of the Shaman. This is Pavan, and I am here today with Joan Forest Mage of Life Force Arts Center. Really excited about today's episode. Joan is a prior teacher of mine, and the classes and really like the whole experience that I had with her is what put me on a path of a practitioner more focused on shamanism, but also not just a practitioner, someone who really practices this in a spiritual way as well. So, welcome, Joan. So glad to have you.
Oh, so wonderful to be here. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so we are going to start out with talking just a little bit about how you came to this path and how it all got started for you. I know oftentimes people have questions in terms of, like, how do I do this for a career, or do I need to, or is it more of a spiritual practice, that sort of thing. And I think that you have a pretty interesting and amazing story in relation to that.
Yes, yes. So I would say I never thought I'd be doing this kind of work. I mean, my whole life was focused on dance and movement and the arts. And so, I mean, I started off with things like ballet and modern dance and kind of got into all of the modern dance and performance art and things like that. This we're talking about in the 1970s and 80s, right? And
Right.
I felt a calling, like when you're about 30 years old, in the arts, especially something like that, like dance or modern dance, like up until that age, you can be somebody else's dancer. Like you're in other people's dance companies or performances or, something like that. And I live in Chicago, right? And always have. And, so we're not a tremendous center for something like modern dance, although at the time that I was, back in the 70s and 80s doing it, there were, I think, in some ways more opportunities, for that, like teachers and
Hmm,
companies and that
interesting.
kind of thing than there are now. Um, but uh, when you get to be about 30, you say, okay, I have to make a decision like, am I going to like teach this? Am I going to start my own company and do choreography and, things like that? Am I going to just say that was a nice first part of my life and I used to do that and now I'm into something completely different, you know? The thing that I felt called to do was create my own form of dance, right? So it wasn't like just to teach the things that I knew. Like my specialty was what they used to call fall recovery dance, which was about swinging, like doing things with swinging and suspension, like Doris Humphrey kind of thing.
Okay.
In more recent years, it's been called release technique. But as you know, because like you release the body and then let it swing. But as one of my teachers said, you could just as well call it support technique because if you release without a support, you have a collapse.
Right.
You know what I mean? So always I have been somebody very practical and grounded in the body, right? So that's where my work always has been.
Mm,
And so I said, okay, well, if I'm going to start my own technique of dance and teach and, that and that kind of thing, then where do I start with developing it? And I decided, well, I could start with doing improvisation, like creating a form of teaching dance that was improvisational. And so I said, well, what are the interesting things? How do I structure the improvisation, right? Now, one thing that Chicago is very good at is improvisational theater. I mean, that's where we got Second City and the whole,
right.
a whole genre of, comedy and, things like that based in improvisation. So that's very, very much what I grew up with also. But I said, well, my interest is how do people relate when they improvise? And from that, I came up with an idea of, I saw 4 different ways that people interact when they improvise. And I called those streaming, which means knowing what you think and feel, like being within your own body and being able to respond and express whatever is within you, not paying attention to other people, just being on your own. The second one was osmosis, which is leading and following, how to lead and how to follow. So that's another way that people interact, like mirroring, is one aspect of that. And the third one I called dialogue, which is interaction. In other words, to like have a conversation in movement. So it's not just I'm following, you do this movement and I do that movement, but it's you do that movement and I do something else with it, right? I develop from what your movement is and then you respond, just like we have a conversation with another person. You say one thing and I go, oh yeah, that happened to me too. I remember back when blah, blah, blah. Like you're adding to the conversation. And then the fourth way is to move with a common form and energy. For example, like Beethoven's Ninth Symphony is a crystallized form. So I call that crystallizing. That, people understand structure and they can follow it together as a group if the whole group, everyone in the group knows what that structure is, And what I found when I taught classes based on this is that people would run screaming from the room and have breakdowns and breakthroughs and have to go to therapists for months after my classes or performances. And this was very consistent and very powerful. I knew the power of the arts, especially dance, especially anything with physical movement.
Right.
What I was doing was not wrong. It was simply cathartic. It was powerful.
Yeah, and what I love about this too is like there's something about like the subtle energies, right? It's pointing to the ways that we communicate and interact that are beyond obviously just like having a conversation. And, even though we all pick up on those cues, the way that you're able to, kind of put it into these different categories and allow people to engage with it in a way where then there's a much more conscious and deeper understanding that
Mm-hmm.
feels I mean it feels really important and I would say like
Thank
it feels
you.
very needed today, but like I imagine it's like always been needed any day at any
Yes.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the past, different cultures, different religious practices, different whatever, families taught people these things in different ways. And
Yes.
now we have lost it.
Right. Right.
Especially with I mean, it's nice and wonderful we have technology that we can be on this Zoom call, but
Yes.
in a lot of ways, you need that physical interaction too. But the Zoom call too, even having a conversation, and again, I think it depends on different people's experiences. And, like what is the skill? Because then I started calling those the skills. So can you be by yourself and think and feel? Do not pass go, do not collect $200 until you can do this, right? Because
Right.
it's the basis of all interaction with yourself or with other people, right? Or with the environment or with spirit. Because that was okay, so I'll just, anyway, back up a little bit. So I realized that I had, because of these strong, experiences that people had, that I said I have two choices. The first is that I can be the kind of artist that takes no responsibility for the reactions of my audiences to my art. And the other is that I really understand what is the power that's coming through this practice.
Right.
This thing that I have been given. I really feel like I was given this by the universe and that it's my job to give it to the people. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? That it's not, and so everything I've done for the past 40 years is based in that. Yeah. And I can show you my chart that that explains this, which is called now called the Life Force Wisdom Wheel.
Hmm.
Yeah. So everything I said, okay, I need to understand what is this power that's coming through me. And first I started by studying for like a semester at Columbia College Dance Therapy Program, because I thought maybe it was something like dance therapy. But I very quickly realized that it was, as you're saying, energy work. It's
Right.
not, like the modern concept of dance therapy, at least at that time in the 1980s, did not encompass what this was. And so I studied Rudolf Laban's work, which is movement analysis. So I'm what's called a CMA, a certified movement analyst. Um, of course, I continued developing this practice. I also at that time was teaching fitness because, I was still developing my work and, it wasn't ready to just be on my own, like founding a school or something like that.
Sure.
So, I just had lots of different experiences. I had taught dance before that and all of that. So I have a lot of, background in, as I say, I have taught from 3-year-olds to 96-year-olds in every condition of physical and mental ability and disability. I have taught like elite athletes. I have taught, mental, like somebody that had developmentally disabled nonverbal adults. I have taught, little kids, all kinds of things. Just how do people deal with, how does the individual that I respect, how do you help their life get better? You know,
Yes. Well, and what I love too is it's such a holistic approach.
yeah.
And you mentioned that, your foundation is dance and frankly being grounded in the body. And
Mhm.
I feel like that is so important sometimes when people are getting into modalities that are related to energy work or there's like a spiritual aspect to it, it can get a little bit ungrounded.
Mhm.
Um, and, it obviously depends on the details, the scenario, the person, all of that. If I'm recalling correctly, you're a Capricorn also?
No, I am a
Oh,
Libra.
a Libra.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So,
And if you look at my birth chart, I have perfectly played out my birth chart.
okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that's like a thread of what I'm recalling. I don't know if that's something we would have
Mhm.
touched on in the past, but yeah, the astrological piece of really being in touch with that energy and,
Mhm.
carrying it through. But I think it's that grounded aspect is so important. And even as you're talking about the techniques and who you've taught and some of the, history of it, it's like there's a groundedness that is sometimes not always present. And I think sometimes it's just because, people are, well, I don't even want to make any assumptions, but my sense is like, people are exploring things where there's a lot of sort of like unknown, or it can be a little bit more challenging to, um, whether it's communicate it in a way that's understood or experience it in a way where you're still very grounded. So that holistic piece to me feels like that connection with spirit, others, nature, self, and like really being rooted in that. it allows you to not like kind of fly away into the ethers.
Right. And I mean, flying away into the ethers is one aspect of life,
Right. I
but
know
it's
it's a
not,
lot of fun. I mean, it is,
it's a
yeah,
lot of
that's a
fun.
part of what I do.
And flying away into the ethers, if you can come back to yourself and to
Yeah.
your body, is like really amazing and wonderful. I mean, see, that's the thing. Actually, what I say a lot of times to people is the main problem, like sometimes you have people that have trouble, like say, I mean, essentially shamanism is you're doing an astral projection. You're
Mm.
doing like a journey is to have your spirit body leave your physical body and
Yes.
go to the other world and talk to your spirit guides, right? And a lot of times, students have problems doing this, right? And so one of the thing that I have observed is the reason people have trouble going out of body is that they're not in the body to begin with.
Yes.
You got to have some place to go out of. You got to be in some place to go out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think this is really important and it speaks to, right, different levels of sometimes trauma that people
Oh,
have
yes.
had. That's
Hmm.
often the case where you're,
Yeah.
not fully in your body, but not being aware of that
Yeah,
too
absolutely.
is,
Yeah. And that's that first level. A lot of it is that first, what I call the first quadrant, which I call streaming, which is knowing what you think and feel. Are you really aware of what you think and feel? Or are you repressing it somehow? Whether that's, and um, first quadrant is about perceiving and expressing, which I call the witness and the artist.
hmm,
Yeah, so those are the first two archetypes, the archetypes of the first quadrant. Like, do you know what you're experiencing? What are you experiencing? What are you aware of? Which, by the way, to do shamanic work, I mean, that's a lot of what shamanic work is. Like when people say, nothing happened on a journey, like I've
yeah,
been teaching, shamanic work since the early 90s, which is, we kind of ended the story at the point where I was first searching for what is this spiritual practice that I have. But so leading people in journeys, which shamanic journey is, you feel your spirit body leaving your physical body, you go through a tunnel, you go to your journey center, which is your place where you meet up with your spirit guides. Beautiful place in nature. You meet up with your spirit guides. And then you state your intention. You go with some kind of intention. And depending on what your intention is, the spirit guides that can help you will be there, right, to help you.
right.
And there was something I was going to say about that. Teaching this, a lot of times people will at first say, nothing's happening. I'm just laying on the floor listening to you drum,
Right.
like that. And then what I will do is say, well, what happened when you were laying on the floor? And then they go into the whole story of their journey. It's like they didn't understand somehow that they were actually getting stuff.
Right.
So do you know what you think and feel? Are you aware of what you're actually, it's actually happening for you, but somehow there's a disconnect in um, acknowledging what you're thinking and feeling.
Yeah, it's
So
also,
that happens a lot with, people that have some kind of trauma like sexual abuse or something like that. Yeah.
right, the disconnect.
Mhm.
It's also making me think about that piece of how empathic you are. Do you know what you think and feel? And then sometimes there's this uncovering of what is mine and what is not mine in terms of those thoughts and feelings when people
Exactly.
tend to take it on from others. And it's interesting because as you gave the example of, you're drumming and I'm laying here feeling like nothing's happening, in that instance, some of that is out of the space a little bit. It's like the container is set. It maybe could be a little bit more clear that you're not. absorbing something from someone else, right? It's different than you're just out in your day and you're engaging with someone, and there's a little bit more of a container around it, but there's so many layers, it feels like, almost, of okay,
Mhm.
can we work through these subtle layers to get to that honed in clarity and make it a little more precise, maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean, that you have to be able to go inward in order to
Yeah.
examine what you're thinking and feeling.
Hmm.
And a lot of people are not used to that, you
I
know.
mean, especially nowadays, right? With, I don't know, I mean, again, like grateful for Zoom and all that technology has brought us, but there's definitely culturally a lot out there that kind of promotes people to be more focused on the exterior and perhaps disconnected in certain ways. And so I always feel like, even though some of my clients don't love the word discipline, like, there could be other ways of putting it, but there's some measure of that is required to kind of cultivate your own inward space and spiritual life. And, whether you are also a teacher and a practitioner, or it's more just a way of life and it's your spiritual life, there's this sacredness of, almost like, the way it's coming to me is kind of like protecting that space. I mean,
Mhm.
just because, again, there's so much that can kind of create a little bit of chaos or distract us.
Oh, absolutely. That's, so much in the modern world is all about that. Everybody's vying for your attention. And I mean, it's not, I mean, I grew up a lot long before the internet or something like that, so
Hmm.
a very different world in terms of what did you need to pay attention to?
Right.
You know, like what were you required to pay attention to? And how was paying attention to something had structure to it,
Mm.
rather than it's just this wild place and you're trying to figure out what you're supposed to pay attention to.
Right.
And that also is, um, like, for example, in teaching people shamanism, they'll sometimes say, well, I didn't feel like my spirit body left my physical body, and I didn't go through a tunnel. I was just like floating out into space. And I'm like, try having your spirit body leave your physical body and go through a tunnel and go to your journey center. And it's kind of hard to explain to someone that that consistency of the practice will really help them, rather than just wildly going wherever, you know.
Right. And just like anything, the more you practice, the better you get.
Exactly. And then, and you can also find, well, that doesn't work for me.
Yes.
But, try it and see if you can feel the difference, between that. But that's, like the things that you're saying about getting distracted, and that's that second quadrant, leading and following.
Mm.
Right? So who do you follow? Who are you going to pay attention to? What is you and what is somebody else? What's your own energy and where's the boundary? Yeah.
And I would even say, like why do you care about this or care about these questions, but again, going back to like the chaos, or how culturally there's so many things to distract, to me
Mhm.
it just feels like, okay, how present do you want to be in your life? Like, to what degree do you want to feel like, you're grounded and you're experiencing it and it is your experience, versus kind of being taken away by life, or on autopilot, or getting swept up, and then there's this big piece of time passing quickly that's connected to that too, where people are like, I don't even know how it's Friday or next month or what happened, or there's such rich opportunity and there's so many amazing things in this world and like in our experience that we can connect to. So
Mhm.
I mean, at least personally, that's how I feel. It's like, yeah, I don't want to just feel like life is dragging me along.
Absolutely. And what is dragging you along, and do you really want to follow that thing?
Right.
You really want
Right.
to be dragged along, And what are the steps that you need to take in order to not be dragged along?
Mm.
And that's also like that whole thing of energetic protection. So as you know, because you were in the program, I have like a whole shamanic training program. And
Yeah.
that's one of the basic things in like level 1 is energetic protection, sensing energy. Like, how do you sense energy? Do you see things? Do you feel things? Do you hear things? Right? So that's part of that, which is more like first quadrant stuff. And then second quadrant stuff is energetic protection, right? Where's the boundary between you and someone else? And how do you enforce respecting of your boundaries? You know, like,
Right.
so that, and again, this is, you know, how do you put it? It's not just a spiritual thing. It's consistent with everything you're going to experience in life.
I love that. I mean, earlier you mentioned, most cultures used to teach this and
Hmm.
don't necessarily teach it anymore.
Right.
And it's such a fundamental part of, I don't know, how we operate in our existence, like all of the energetics. So it
Hmm.
feels so like crucial and vital to me. And right, it's going to really benefit you in all areas of your life to have some more awareness and understand. Like it just feels like core things where it's like, wait, how is this not, taught in school or I don't know, taught by your family or whatever?
Yeah. Well, it is, but
Hmm.
different parts of it are taught differently, and also they're taught maybe for a world that's no longer there.
Mm. Interesting.
You know,
Yeah.
like when you grow up, you're going to be a wife and mother, and here is because you're a woman, and your husband will take care of you, and if he doesn't, then there's legal recourses and things like that. Well, now there's not that.
Right.
I'm just giving one example
Yes.
of many things, but that was a structure. Remember, crystallizing is the fourth quadrant.
Right.
What is the common form and energy? What is the structure? As I say, many comedies are based in the hero of the story does not understand that they're in a structure. They don't understand. They go, oh, this is a nice, like table full of food. Well, I'll just go ahead and eat it. It's like somebody else's, you know what I mean? Like, so do you understand when you're in a structure? And the second quadrant and the fourth quadrant are related because having boundaries is also related to being in a structure.
Mm.
Like, and are you choosing your boundary? Are you aware of your boundaries and are you aware of the structures that you're in? And are you choosing the structures you want to be in? You know,
Yeah, this is really important.
well, it's very interesting because I can remember all the way back to when I first came up, like downloaded really with a lot of this stuff, but also in the real world, the reactions that my students were having, right? I was explaining this to someone, you know, knowing what you think and feel, leading and following, interacting, and moving with a common form and energy. And he said, well, that's pretty simple. Why do you need to do like a whole, class on it? It's like, yeah, yeah.
Right.
So, yes, I have spent 40 years with relentless energy figuring this out. And one thing that it's been clear to me that this was handed to me. In fact, going back to the progression, so 1985, I first delineated this. And then I spent about 10 years to 1995 studying all different kinds of spiritual and psychological, teachings and like that kind of thing. And by 1995, I said, okay, I actually, what I would consider my initiation as a shaman was the point at which I had studied some shamanic work, and it really felt like home to me. I had gotten a soul retrieval. It really changed my life. You know,
Hmm.
like one of the ways that soul retrieval changed my life was that all of a sudden people paid attention to me. Like, I wish I had written it down, but the day after I had the soul retrieval, like, I always used to call myself Cassandra. You know, Cassandra was the Greek prophetess, that she was cursed, that she would always be able to tell exactly what was going to happen, but no one would believe her.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
No matter how many times she was right, the next time nobody believed her.
you're right.
And the thing that she was saying happened, and people kept not believing her. That changed for me the day after the soul retrieval. And I really do feel that's the reason that I can do this kind of work, because people really will pay attention to what I'm saying. You know, I have that kind of like presence and connection to that people, I'm very dedicated to truth.
Yes.
In some ways, I'm not the one that like holds your hand. You
Hmm.
know, there's different kinds of healers, you know, that's like comforting and holding your hand and, you know, things like that. But I do know how to open my heart, you know,
Yes.
to that people can feel that I empathize and I understand what they're talking about and that I've been there, you know, like that kind of thing. But 3 times after the day I had the soul retrieval, I would say something to someone and they go, you know, you're right, I'm going to do that. I was just like, I don't believe this, you know. So, um,
So
yeah.
that I will just say is such a great example. And, you've been doing sessions individually also with people over the years, and I'm sure have seen this over and over. And for myself, it's also true where typically I'll often say to people related to soul retrieval that, potentially what happens is in subtle energy, but it's profound. Like this is a life-changing thing. And
Hmm.
beforehand, it's a little bit, there's like, it's a little abstract, or it's like, okay, let's like go in and see what happens as far as we're holding the intention and, you just don't know how it's going to manifest. But on the other side of it, time and time again, I mean, I have just seen so many or cool or been witness to like transformational, amazing things.
Hmm.
And so, not only is that so great, but it's also like if there's pieces of it that we even can explain, I always feel like, so what? Like the transformation and the change is there. And then if, the whole maybe trajectory of your life or whatever it is, something shifts that just really kind of like up levels things, it's such a gift. It's like, what is more valuable than that?
Yeah, it's one of the most efficient and ancient forms of healing there is.
Yes, I
And
agree.
it's just like, um, I think it was not, was it Ken Wilber? I'm not sure. Let's see. I think it was Ken Wilber that said, um, if there is no mind-body connection, how do you explain how I raise my arm? You know, I am going
Okay.
to raise my arm. I thought, and my arm moved.
Right.
The mind-body connection. So it's like, of course we have mind-body connection,
Yes.
you know. So that, you know, the energy, like, how do you put it? There's all kinds of things that we don't understand about the world and life and, you know, the things that our culture, our modern culture now tells us to pay attention to are a little teeny bit of,
Right.
you know, what reality is. So I've just always found that you know, in the center of the wheel is the true self. Like, what are your
Mm.
gifts and mission? What is your energy field? You know, what is your true self? versus like your false self? And like, what is soul and spirit?
Well, you also
Yeah,
mentioned being so committed to truth
yeah,
and I also feel that. I feel like my main commitment is like truth and authenticity. And over the years, I have just more and more learned to like trust what comes through intuitively and from the guides and without knowing what happens next. Or I mean, it's a pretty significant shift to be in a space to just really be able to do that, and not feel like wanting to control things or needing to know or that sort of thing. But again, that like authenticity and the truth, there just is nothing. Um, I don't even know how to articulate it, honestly. There's like nothing that really resonates with me more. I think that I don't know. I feel like it's a part of kind of hopefully how we're meant to orient as humans. And, maybe we get it in this life, maybe we get it in another, and it just evolves. I don't really know, but it does feel important.
right. I am reminded of Byron Katie, who
Mm.
said the first thing you have to ask to solve a problem is, what is the problem?
Yeah.
And the second thing you have to ask is, what is really the problem?
Mm. Yeah.
Not just the surface level. Like,
Yes,
okay, so if the surface level would solve the problem, you would have had it solved.
exactly.
And that's what I always say about, why do shamanic work? Why do intuitive work? Well, if you can figure out something logically, by all means do that. I mean, that's a lot faster and in some ways surer, you know. It's like
Yeah.
if it's that obvious, you could figure it out, you know.
Right.
But you do intuitive work and ritual and go into metaphor and talk to your spirit guides and like all this kind of stuff when what is the solution is not obvious. There's another layer there that you haven't gotten to yet that is the real problem.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, what's coming up is I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about, you mentioned getting a download earlier, and then also we both kind of mentioned our guides. So I don't want to segue into this too much, but plant medicine is really popular these days, and oftentimes people will reach out to me or they'll have a context related to shamanism, that's related to that because there's a lot of indigenous shamans who are being brought into our country for some of these rituals with different types of plant medicine, or people are also going to other countries, where it's kind of like a mix of the indigenous folks and then people from the US or, other countries where it's like they're also holding the space for it. And so, of course, like a medicine person or a shaman in an indigenous culture is, I would say, delving into similar techniques and practices that we are, but of course, doing it in their own way that is relevant to that culture and environment and, their upbringing and community and all of these things. But it's come up, I would say, over the years in different ways where people have sort of been like, okay, you're a shaman. Like, how did you become that in, this country? Who did you study with? And like, there's just a space of like not completely understanding. Like, I thought a shaman was like, somebody in the Amazon or, somebody in Russia and it's like, yes, it is. It's true.
Mhm.
But they're working with their guides also and through whatever rituals and ceremonies they have. And so I think I've also, read a lot of things and done research over the years where like there's this crossover. We're going into these realms where, you can be from New York or Chicago or whatever, or sure, you can be from the Amazon and still going into these spaces.
You mean like that, the
So
commenting on that?
yeah, so I guess I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent, but the question in there maybe would be, um, how is this shamanism and how is it maybe different or the same as like medicine men and women in these indigenous cultures?
Right, right. well, we're people. I
Yes.
mean, we're still the same species,
Hmm.
you know? And I really, and again, I don't want to say anything, somebody else could have a completely different opinion of
Yes.
this. This is a
Yeah.
controversial thing.
Yeah.
And,
That's
about, well, can a modern person that never studied with indigenous culture really call themselves a shaman?
right.
Let me, there's several different aspects to this. One thing is, I come by this honestly, because
Yes.
I did not go, oh, that's shamanism. I think I'm going to call myself a shaman. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's like I really did a lot of searching to find out what it is that I was naturally doing, that I was
Yes.
downloaded by the universe with, you know.
Yes.
And at the end of all of that searching and, having experience, I never did anything with plant spirit medicine because I didn't have to. I was already getting, contact with spirit guides and all that. I had to figure out what I was experiencing,
Right.
you
Well,
know.
and this is true for me as well.
Yeah.
So thank God I met you.
Yeah, yeah, and uh, so at the end of all of that, I journeyed to my spirit guides. Well, if you're journeying to your spirit guides, you're kind of shamanic,
Right.
And I said, well, should I call myself a shaman? I certainly don't want to misappropriate, an indigenous culture or anything like that. And my
Yes.
guide said, don't worry about what you're called, just do the work. We're handing it to you on a silver platter.
Mhm.
We want you to do here is the thing you're supposed to teach the world in this lifetime, here it is, you know. And so I call myself a shaman with great respect for well, first of all, I want to go back and say, a
Yes.
lot of people think the word shaman is from Native Americans. It's not. It's
Right.
a word from the Tungus people of Siberia
Hmm.
that Mirsu Eliade, who was a researcher and a professor of religion, I believe from Bulgaria, if I have to look that up. And he was studying the Tungus people of Siberia in the 1940s. And he said, well, actually, if you look at what they believe, there's a lot of other cultures in the world that have that same belief of talking to spirit guides and going to the upper world, middle world, and lower world, and traveling through a tunnel to get there, and having your journey center, and working with animal spirit guides, and all of this. And so he wrote this whole book about that, you know. And so that was the beginning of why the word shaman got into the consciousness and the expression of academia first. And
Right. It's more of a anthropological term that could
yes,
speak to whoever is, doing this in different cultures.
yeah, because actually, if you want to be strict, only the Tungus people of Siberia shamans are shamans.
Mm. Hmm.
Everybody, there's all different kinds of words like Awen in Celtic, and Sangoma in Africa, and curandero in Mexico, and um, Mudang, I think it is, in Korea. But, it's like all over the place. There's different words for a lot of the same kind of practices.
Right.
So, I mean, you can go back and forth about this or anything where there's like, what is marriage? What is what is a family? What is a government? What is, what I'm saying? Like, different cultures use that same word for, in some ways, a lot different things. What is the essence of that? And of course, we're also getting it from anthropologists who have studied those cultures, and they're saying, well, that's a government in that culture, or that's marriage, or that's a family, or, you know what I mean? So anyway, all of these kind of things. So I just try to stick with helping. The way that I've learned to describe it is, I help people with human consciousness, human relationships, and the human energy field.
Love that.
And
Yeah.
there is a pattern to it, and there are skills that you can learn that will just help you navigate life a lot better, you know. So we haven't even begun to talk about spirit guides yet. We've, in some ways we're only talking about the first three quadrants, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, but that's, how do I put it? Um,
I
yeah,
think,
yeah. Go ahead.
well, it feels like almost in some ways the most important piece to highlight because culturally in this country, people potentially have the least context for it. I mean, some people do in different ways, and then you can kind of talk about religion and how that could or couldn't connect. But ultimately, I can say for myself, being able to journey and then connect with my spirit guides and develop these relationships. I mean, that's been huge for like my spiritual life, but like my whole life. Just this is a
Right.
very valuable piece of my life now that's like really integrated. I mean, but in the beginning it was like shocking, like, oh my gosh, they're here. Oh, and they're
Yeah.
supporting me and they've been around before I reached out and you know, um but again, it's something that depending on who is tuning in, not everyone has like a context for this. And it's like
Mhm.
there's so much richness there.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and a lot of I always say that I train trainers.
Hmm.
I'm not the teacher for somebody that's just afraid of this or dipping
Right.
their toe into it. It's, for people that in a lot of ways are helping other people to learn about these things, and they're already on the path and they are dealing maybe with, like an experience, experiences of the other world. And I
Yeah.
always like to say, the person is like, I see dead people. And I go,
Yes.
yeah, I do too. What are they telling you?
Yeah.
Do they need something?
Right.
In other words, uh, uh, you know, and another thing is, having other people to confirm. And okay, no profession advances without shop talk. If you're having these kind of experiences and you're always around people that go, that's weird, that's evil, you better pray and not have those experiences,
Right. Right.
whatever it is, you're never going to figure out what it is that's happening, you know, or how you could use it, or that what your experience is really valid, and that there's tons of other people, there's whole cultures of people that know exactly, what's going on with you.
Right.
I mean, not exactly, because each person is unique. Every artist is unique, every shaman is unique.
Hmm.
That's a hard thing that I've found teaching people, because I have people that come from all kinds of backgrounds, right? You know, and they're like, well, tell me exactly how this is going to work. And it's like, that's your own journey,
Yes.
you know, how it works for you. And I'll try to help you the best I can to, you know, to take advantage of that, to understand yourself.
I feel like as you're speaking, I'm learning and connecting with more and more that I really learned from you or connected with at an earlier time. So when you were saying you're, not necessarily, excuse me if I don't say it exactly the same way, but like, hold the hand holding teacher and it's more about, even just earlier, not just dipping your toe in. Um, and it's even making me think of like spiritual power. But I take a very similar approach. It's, likewise can, open my heart and be in that space. But there's this piece of, if you're here and we're doing this and we're connecting, like, let's stay in an empowered place and like, let's do the thing.
Yeah, yeah.
There's something about, and there's all kinds of things, right, that can come up for people that can maybe block it or hinder it a little bit. And that's just the human experience that we all have. Like, it could be
Mhm.
fear, but it also could be, um, sometimes the examples that's coming up to me is like, maybe you've identified with something for a long time, like being a little bit of a victim, or a certain relationship in your life has always been a certain way and it's never changed. And we have all these narratives. So anyway, I don't want to go in too many directions with it, but just suffice it to say, all of those types of things are relevant. But then it's like, okay, do we want to change, or do we want healing? Or once we have that intention, it
Mhm.
really just feels to me like, let's do that. Let's not
Yeah.
be distracted by what is not that.
Mhm. Yeah. What is your intention? What is your goal? That kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. You
So
know.
sometimes like that has come off. I mean, ultimately it's served me over the years immensely, but sometimes it can come off a little bit like hardcore or something, like when you're in the role of a healer, if someone is expecting, uh, maybe it's like, oh, just hold a loving space and that's it. It's like, yeah, that's part of it, but there's
Mhm.
also a strength and okay, let's do the hard thing, or let's move whatever it is forward. So
Right.
that feels important.
Yeah. Exactly. You know. So yes, it's yeah.
Um, all right, let's see. Is there anything else? I feel like if you could give maybe an example of, and you've already been talking about this in some ways, but how this has been challenging, but then also how it's been rewarding. Um, I think that that is something that I discuss often and can be valuable information.
Yeah. Well, a challenge has been to continue to delve into the system, which is now called the Life Force Wisdom Wheel, and never get distracted from that,
Yes.
you know, and to be honest about that and to not try to define myself in a way that would not be consistent with that. you know.
Hmm.
I also thought it was interesting, one of the questions that you had asked about, how, I forgot exactly what it was, how does this relate to women?
Yes.
What exactly, do you remember exactly that question?
I'm just looking
These
if
were
it,
some of the prompts.
oh, what has it been like for women to walk this path over time?
Yeah, well, I
Yes.
mean, of course, I don't know, I mean, there could be a lot of situations in the past or even currently of how women are treated if they have, like, say, psychic powers or something like this. But the thing I've always been, from the beginning, is it doesn't matter if a person was a man or woman. It like, when I was first doing this in the early 90s, everyone would come to me and say, oh, you must be doing this to help women develop their natural psychic abilities. And I'm like, no, I teach men as well as women. It's like whoever needs this knowledge, I
Right.
teach. And actually, in a lot of ways, I found that, going back to the idea of like fearfulness or dip your toe in or, something like this, that sometimes women, the men that come to learn this are more serious about it and more ready
Mm,
for it because they have to challenge a lot of, like, oh, men don't do that, we're logical, you know what I mean?
right.
So if they're coming to me to learn about this stuff, they're ready, And also just they've been taught to not be nice and, accommodating and not tell the truth, make everything nice. And, they just come out and say who they are and what they do. So, in some ways, it's easier to teach men to do this stuff.
So this is making me think of a soul retrieval that I had while training with you from Kevin at the time. And so it was just really poignant. I mean, I won't go into all of the details, but it's just coming up like I feel I should share a piece of it. So when I was doing the training for a portion of that time, I was also working a very stressful full-time job in downtown Chicago, for a company where the owner really only had a few employees, and it made sense. Like while I was there for maybe 9 months or something, and there was like constant turnover because he was very just emotional and probably and inappropriate and whatever. The energy was a really challenging energy to be in, all week long, let alone any amount of time. And some of that was brought into my intention for a soul retrieval that Kevin, who was also doing the training with me, did for me. And it was so uh, clear. It was like he was able to go into the space and connect with this person. And the retrieval ended up being a transformation that made it much easier for me to be in that energy and interact with this boss and superior in person for the duration. Eventually I moved on, but it was huge. It was just like so significant. I don't honestly know how I would have been able to keep doing it otherwise.
Yeah. So you mean understanding why he was acting the way he was acting or something like that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the retrieval really showed like where the wound was and the understanding, and it allowed me to, um, I'm gonna say, interact in a way that I had more of a compassionate energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so people were constantly, just feeling defensive and angry at him. And so he was always feeling like this is how people see me and treat me, and I can never get enough respect, and I can never, like it was
Yeah.
just such a, and then I was able to shift into that space and have a different, not just relationship, but also a less stressful experience in my working life at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, he's also causing it
Yeah.
by putting out that kind of vibration, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, you know. So yes, I mean so my question to you about that would also be, um, uh, second quadrant is about conflict. It's about this is who I am and this is who you are and we're gonna fight,
Yes.
like that kind of thing. Whereas the third quadrant is interacting, having a conversation. Park your ego at the door and let's solve this problem.
Yes.
Right? You know what I mean? So and that can be achieved in different kind of ways. And it happens all the time with people. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like, I always think of, like, they say there's 6 degrees of separation. Like, in other words, you know that, what that refers to, like, if you take a person, like, say, if I, there's somebody on the other side of the world, but I know someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows that person.
Right.
So there's only 6 degrees of separation between any two people in the world. But you know what? It's really good sometimes that there's 6 degrees of separation between some people because this person would not get along with this person. But those degrees of separation, it's like this person learns how to deal with this person, learns how to deal with this person. And so
Right.
therefore, somehow the world does not explode or implode or, something like that. And I don't know, there's a lot to be said for, like, if you've ever had a situation where Like you don't get along with somebody, but then another person comes in, and because both of you can relate to that other person, then everything goes smoother,
Right.
stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, shamanism is about energy.
Right.
Yes, the a lot of people talk about, let's go to the fifth dimensional reality, and we need to get away from three-dimensional reality. It's like, wait, you're not even in three-dimensional. You're how to master three dimensions. I mean, that's like the Rudolf Laban stuff of movement and movement analysis. Three-dimensionality is health. Like if you're only moving in two dimensions and you're not moving in the third dimension, that's where the wound is.
Honestly, I love that. I mean, there's so much in the, I would say, new age realm, right? Where they're talking about ascending into the
We must
fourth
ascend.
dimension or the fifth dimension, or what do we have to do? And it's cut like, yeah, first ask, have I mastered the third dimension?
The
What even
three
is
dimensions.
that?
And of course, now that so much is done online and through screens, that's two-dimensional,
Right.
and even little kids are all on screens when they
Hmm.
should. I mean, who is it? Montessori said that a long time ago.
Right.
Like kids shouldn't even learn to read until they're like 8 years old or something. I forget exactly that, because you should just be dealing with, your your three-dimensional world of
Right.
what is real, what is a physical object.
Yeah, I mean, and it also goes back to so with your training programs and through Life Force, you offer virtual classes and then in person as well if you're in
Mhm.
Chicago. And over time, I have done now I do virtual sessions with people and will occasionally do some type of virtual group. And on the one hand, I feel like it's such a gift to be able to connect like this and to offer
Mhm.
that, but it's also the in-person is essential. And I think if you're coming from, a shamanic perspective, it's like, of course. I mean, we need to be together and, connecting in all of these dimensions and picking up the subtle energies and outside and for rituals and ceremony. Like it's really essential.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it's good to get outdoors every day, no
Yes.
matter the weather.
Yeah.
If I really find the wind, and the weather, even if I'm, being in Chicago, and there isn't that many trees or grass or things like that. There's always the sunshine and the darkness and the stars and the moon, and connecting with all of that and knowing that's part of our body. Our body's our nature. The
Hmm.
body is the part of nature that's always with you.
Yes.
So if you want like the, earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my spirit, right? So
Hmm.
the heat of your body, the fluids going through your body, the bones, the earth, the air into the lungs, you know, noticing those things. And that
Yeah.
we're part of nature. We're not separate from nature. That's a big teaching in shamanism.
Hmm.
You know, it's hard to call what you're doing shamanic if you're not really thinking about that.
Right.
If you're saying,
Absolutely.
well, humans should conquer nature or something. Yeah, it's not about that at all.
Hmm.
Yeah. So what has been the reward? Well, in some ways, the same way as the challenge, to finally figure it out.
Right.
You know,
Right.
oh, believe me, I many times I've said, I need to live long enough to figure this out.
Hmm.
You know, but I also said, well, if it takes me another lifetime, I will too.
Well, you said in explaining it, right, as shamanism and delving into that a little bit, the first thing was I come by this honestly.
Hmm.
And I feel like um, the same is true for me. I know in the beginning I was like, well, how am I gonna make a career out of this, or like money or a living, or
Yeah.
that piece was like kind of hard to wrap my mind around, because I would discover that it's like it's very, in some ways, very solo. Like, okay, it's there's not a whole, you're not like sending your resume somewhere and plugging into a
Mhm.
company or
Yeah.
something. You're likely creating your own business. And I didn't approach it with that intention. So prior to connecting with you, I had just done like a Reiki master. Well, I didn't go to the master level yet. I think I had done Reiki level 1 and 2. And in the couple of years prior, I had done a few things where I was starting to learn about energy work and kind of connect more, I would say, with my spirituality as well.
Hmm.
Um, and so it wasn't like I had some sort of plan, right? Like I'm going to do this work for a living, or I'm going to do a shamanic. I mean, honestly, I didn't even know what that was.
Right.
So it evolved naturally over time. And then my guides eventually were like, yeah, you're going to do this work, you're going to teach, you're going to do it for a living, and it's always going to provide for you. And so in times of maybe a little bit more fear or stress or whatever, where I'd be like, can you be a little more specific? Like, what do I do now? How's it going to provide for me? Or, oftentimes I would kind of receive an answer like, well, that's none of your business. Like, just kind of put your head down and do what you're doing, and
Right.
don't worry about it. Like, you'll be provided for. And
Right.
so that piece connects with like a trust, I guess, too. It's like you develop these relationships with spirit and with this way of life. And over time, there's
Mhm.
more trust and confidence in that. And it's like, okay, I don't need to know. This is what I'm doing, and it's gonna work out, whatever that looks like, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, when I started the space, which is, Life Force, well, I call it now Life Force Shamanic Arts and Healing, that the guide said, do this now, we will not let you fail, right? So
Yes.
that was the thing that they kept telling me. And, earlier in the process, I kept asking, are you sure I'm supposed to still be doing this?
Right.
Because it was not easy to keep,
Yes.
the space around. And I
Mhm.
mean, places, having come from that background of like small modern dance companies or something, arts places open and close all the time. And even, healing spaces or whatever, people really feel a calling to do their work, you know. And it took me a long time, before I could open, 20 years before
Yeah.
I could open actually a space. I was always working out of other people's spaces, things like that. But that was good too. Like a
Right.
place like Healing Earth Resources, that was a wonderful place, community of healers. And, you know, over
And
the
what was the
years I
year that
learned,
Life Force opened?
what,
What was the year that Life Force opened?
2008?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really started, for example, the company, which is now Life Force Arts Foundation, the nonprofit tax exempt organization. I started that in 1988.
Hmm.
So 88 to 2008, I didn't have my own space. And then 2008 till now, I've had a space.
I feel like it's fair to say there's a high level of commitment to the path required. I mean, I just feel like you really illustrate that, and that's also been my experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know. And I mean, kind of like what you said about, um, do you have an intention? Do you have a goal? Are you willing to deal with all the fear of failure and the fear of success,
Yes.
like with whatever you're doing? That is, like you were saying about, being grounded in
Hmm.
truth, and your own power. Like, how
Yeah.
much can you actually do? And knowing, no, owning your power. Like, I know I can do this.
Yes.
And I'm not doing it from an egotistical way. I'm doing
Right.
it because Spirit is guiding me,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to do that. I thought of something this morning, and I'm not sure if it was, from some of the questions and all of that, but it was a poem that was a dance that I was in a dance company that I was in, like in the 1980s. And the poem was called Arriving at Onion. And the poem was like, first I was an egg, which is easily cracked. Then I was a banana that was easily bruised. Then I was an orange. If you cut me, I spit out acid at you. But now I'm an onion. My layers are all the same from the outside to the inside, and I have more layers than you have endurance.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's
So,
great.
yeah, to get to that, know who you are and just be that. Yeah.
Mm,
And that the more and more I'm realizing that the wisdom wheel, by the way, speaking of, other cultures and that, I had somebody who was Ojibwe, from the Ojibwe tribe in Canada,
mhm.
study with me. And she said, wow, looking at the wisdom wheel, this is basically, and what you're teaching, it's basically what I was taught, living on the reservation and stuff like that. It's,
Right.
a lot of parallels. The teachings, like she said, the teachings of the medicine wheel are endless.
Yes.
Yeah. And that it was really good for me to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
I've also had somebody who is Islamic and she talks to the jinn and she's also a Reiki master. And she wanted to do shamanic work because she was like, well, I keep getting messages from the guides when I'm doing Reiki. And then, and then, what was it? Like, so she was doing the program where she was, like you're doing soul retrievals for, volunteer clients.
Yes.
And she said, well, I don't know if I can do it like you do it. And I said, well, what do you do? And she said, well, I just do Reiki and then the guides tell me what to say and that. And I said, well, that's how you do soul retrieval. She said, really?
Yes.
Yeah, oh, okay, done.
Right.
Yeah, so it's about guiding people. We have an inner knowing. You're trying to find that inner knowing of what you're supposed to do
Right.
and be guided towards that and be authentic.
I think this is a great message to leave off on.
Mm-hmm.
You said know who you are and just be that. And I really feel like the training and the teachings that you offer can really help somebody to get more clarity and to delve into that in a deeper way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so I also feel like there definitely could be a part two or more to this because there really is so
Definitely.
much we can discuss. So I would love to do that at some point in
Mm-hmm.
the future.
Yeah.
Um, so thank you so much for joining me. I
Oh,
am
thank you.
honored. And Joan, if you want to share a little bit about where people can reach you and the website, please do so.
Yes, the website is lifeforcearts.org, all one word. And I'm at joan@lifeforcearts.org. Phone number is 773-327-7224. And we'd love to have you. And we um, do things by Zoom. Oh, I wanted to tell you that story. So in the fall of 2019, there were more people coming to me saying, well, I never get to Chicago. Is there some way I can still study with you? And I said, in 2020, we're going to do more classes by Zoom. So
Yeah.
there you go. So that's, when that happened, that everything shut down. Actually, we didn't shut down. We just kept going here, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that it was, just, I mean, I already had that intuition
Right.
that we were going to start doing that. So it has worked out very well to still do this. And so I've had people actually from all over the world, take classes or come for sessions or, something by Zoom. And even before Zoom, I was doing it like by phone and, stuff like that. So definitely, I think that's basically it, the phone and the website and email address. Yeah,
Okay, so thank you to everyone for tuning in, for joining us. Feel free to reach out or to leave comments, and I absolutely look forward to further discussion. I feel like we covered so many great things.
exactly. Thank you. Wonderful
Right.
being with you.
See you soon.
Thank you.